Hello and welcome to Tableau Conference-ish. This session is in connection with the DataFam Community Jam, which is hosted by the Tableau Fringe Festival and Tableau themselves. This session is going to be Speed Tipping Favorites by myself, Lorna Brown. I am a Tableau Zen Master and a Public Ambassador, and I'm also a Tableau and Alteryx consultant at the Information Lab here in the UK. And I also have with me
Jeff Shaffer. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and Vice President of IT and Analytics at a company in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm a 5-time Tableau Zen Master and also co-author of the Big Book of Dashboards.
Great to have you with us, Jeff.
Thank you.
So this session will cover my favorite tips with a U in it, and it will also cover Jeffrey's favorite tips. Are we ready?
We're ready.
Let's go. Okay, so first thing, we're going to have a look at the new data model. So I have my data set here ready, and I also have my monthly targets. So I have my orders, and I have my monthly targets, which shows you a target per subcategory per month. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag this into my little box here, and I get this orange noodle. In here, it'll bring up my relationship calculation, so I can edit this to make it so that it looks at just the month. Currently, it's just related on subcategory, so we're going to add in a new create relationship calculation. And we're going to say the date trunc month of the order date. And then we're going to click OK. And then on the right-hand side, we're going to relate that to the month. And what this does is it gives us the relationship between our subcategories and our monthly targets. But what does that actually mean? So here in my view, I have my table, which is filtered to October 2020. On my right, I have now 2 separate tables. Each table is done independently because it's based on the relationships. So I can now bring in my targets. I'm going to drag and drop it on top to get a dual axes. I'm going to right click and make sure I synchronize. And on my targets, I'm going to change this to a Gantt bar. And then I'm going to make the bars slightly thinner. And I'm going to make the targets slightly bigger. But notice how my Gantt bar actually does go wider instead of fatter. So there's a way we can change this. Again, we're just going to use an ad hoc calculation of, I'm going to put in here 200. And I'm going to add this to size. And now when I add that to size, it makes my Gantt bar a lot bigger. So just to play around with this a little bit more, I'm going to change it to 100, and it makes my Gantt bar a little bit wider. So when we have this relationship type of thing, we have 2 separate sections. We have a dimensions and a measures per table. So we have our monthly targets, and we have our orders. We also have this no man's land down here. And the no man's land is basically where Tableau cannot say for definite which table this calculation is going to belong to. So, for example, this sales rank, it doesn't know which field it's using or what level of detail it needs to go down to. So that's a quick overview for the relationship. Also, notice how we've got these reference lines in the background, or we want it all to be a certain font. There's an easy way to do that. Go Format, Workbook, and in here we can change the font throughout the whole of the workbook, but we can also remove those pesky grid lines and also remove the pesky 0 lines if we don't want them as well. There's lots of other lines you can remove, but that's just a global formatting. Now onto Spatial. So we have the shapefile for each of the boroughs in London, and we also have the crime points for the 2020 crimes, which has latitude and longitudes. So in our crime data, this is what we have. We have our latitude and longitude for each one of our crimes. Our London boroughs, we have a geometry field. So if I double click that and add name to color, you can see that we have a polygon type for each of these different areas in London. But what happens if I want to find out the number of crimes in those specific areas for based on these 2 data sets? Now, in my crime data, I have LSRA name, but if I just quickly right-click and describe, you'll see that it's got codes on the end. I could split that out, but I can also use Spatial. So if I go into my data set and edit this, I can add in here, in fact, I'll edit this one. In here, we have our spatial connection already created. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this option called Make Point. Make Point creates a geometric field with inside your Tableau dataset. So we have latitude and longitude, and we want it to intersect the geometry. Now I'm hoping this doesn't create a new extract, but we should be fine. So let's go to our data set. So now if I double click geometry, add my name to my detail, I can now use this crime boroughs count onto my colour to see actually Westminster has the most amount of crimes in London 2020. The other section that we like to do with these spatial side of things is something called make point, which I've just shown you. So if I show you this calculation, make point, latitude and longitude, this is going to give me a crime point, geometric point for each one of these crimes. I also have Buckingham Palace here. So we have the latitude and longitude for Buckingham Palace. So if I just clear this sheet, I double click my crime, it's going to bring up every single crime as a single point. I'll add my crime ID to my detail. And I also then want to just focus in on on a certain amount of distance from the Buckingham Palace. So here we have a distance calculation, which is distance from Buckingham Palace to my crime point, and I'm going to change this to meters. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to add this to my filters. I'm going to change it to all values, and in here we're going to say we want a maximum of 1,000 meters out. So when I click OK, what happens here is my Tableau will filter down to just those points that are within 1,000 meters of my Buckingham Palace. So we can, like I did before, we have a parameter. So if I show my parameter, we've got miles, kilometers, meters, and feet, which is what my original calculation had. So I'm going to change this back to distance, which is my parameter. Click OK, and now this is going to be within 100 meters of my calculation. So we just want to change this to within 5 kilometers. So when I look at this, you'll see that it's now bringing me a nice circular radial chart. I can also, if I right click and create bins, and I create a bin of 1 in here, and then I'm going to add this to my color. So if I add that to color, you'll see it gradually fades out as it gets out towards the outside of my circle. So it gives you like a target chart. The next section is density. On here we have a marks card. If you change this to density, you'll see where the hotspots are for our crime points, so that's in there. And then make line is another function of spatial. So if I just do make line, here we have make line. We want our tour points to our home point. And then if I double click that, that'll give me a hub and spoke automatically. Over to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Lorna. Those tips were awesome. I especially like the radial distance around the points on a map. I thought I would start out with just a title screen, just to kind of show you some other tips that I use when I'm working on a dashboard. The first one would be just a floating box. It could be a blank or it could be a floating text box, but a blank will work just as well. And I size that box in the form of what will be a divider. I'm going to click on the layout tab on next to the dashboards and change the background. In this case, I'll just make it white, and I can make that as small as I want or as wide as I want. And a great way to add a divider line to your dashboard. You can make them real thin or thick, and then in this case, you know, just for fun, probably more like a face mask, for this session. So we can do that. The next one I wanted to show you is adding links into any of your text box. In this case, I have a bunch of links to websites of my own, Data Plus Science and the Big Book of Dashboards. And let's just say I want to set up a link to go to the Tableau reference guide. Well, in the text box, all I really have to do is add HTTP with the colon, with our slashes, and then we'll have a link. I hit return there, didn't mean to do that. And now we have a working Tableau page that links out to my Tableau reference guide. So that's a great way to add a link. That'll work in captions, work in titles as well. Along those same lines, you can copy and paste text from outside of Tableau into Tableau. And so this is, tips and charts that we're going to show you along the way here. I want to make that bigger. That's not a great title for the size of the font. So what I'm going to do is double click in this text box and just copy the font. I'm going to take it out to say Word, and I'm going to paste it into Word. So I can go into Word and I can type my font size, and now I have 140 font size in Tableau. And when I copy that font, Control C or Command C, I think it is on a Mac, I go into Tableau and paste it, and now I have a really, really big font in Tableau. And you'll see it comes in much, much larger than the 72 that you have limited in your text box. And again, that'll work anywhere in your text, your labels, anywhere in Tableau that takes text, you can copy and paste from Word. This works especially well when you want to have a really big band. So in this case, I did the exact same thing. I just copy and pasted it into the text box where you can see it's much larger than the 72 that it gives me as a default, but I can have a really, really big number that I can use on there. For the tips and tricks that I'm doing today, I have a daily tip of the day on Twitter and LinkedIn and really all the social media websites. And I'm taking the favorites. You'll see that some of these were favorited a lot and some of them not so much. So I'm taking my top favorite tips from that list. And here is a list of those tips. You'll see them just in sort of a text box. The problem is the text is too big to fit in the row. Now you could do an Excel sort of trick where you hover your mouse right over the row and you could drag the size of it. You could also use your control key, and with your up arrows, you can just up arrow to make the size of the cell bigger. You can down arrow to make the size of the cell smaller for your row or your columns. We'll come back to that tip in a little bit. The next one is I have these thank you slides here, that I want at the end of my workbook. And if you've ever, like me, clicked and started dragging it over to the right, it takes forever as it's moving and moving and moving to finally get it to the end of the workbook. Down in the bottom right-hand corner, there are 3 icons, and the icon that I'm going to use way down here at the bottom is this third icon over. Is called the Show Sheet Sorter. And this is a great way to see all your sheets in the workbook. It's also a great way if you need to move something, you can use your control key again and multi-select sheets, and you can drag them much faster in this view all the way to the end, and I can move them down to the end without having to play with the one at a time in this view over here. So a really quick way to move your things. The next one I want to show you is a quick split of names and naming sheets. In this case, I have customer name, and it's 1 pill. Now, I could go over here and right-click and split it down here in a transform. There's a split option, but a quicker way to do that is to just right-click and just click split. And it'll now split those fields automatically for me. It'll use the auto split, and you'll see I have first name on the left and last name on the right. Now, maybe I want to name those. Quick way to name these is double-click in your calculation, and this comment field is your name. So I'm just going to type first, and there I name that field. I'm going to double-click on the second one, and I'm going to say last, and that's the name of that field. Maybe I want to swap them because I want last name first, so I'll click the first pill. I'll use my control key and the second pill, and I'll right-click, and I can swap those pills. And now the last is on the left, and the first is on the right. And then the last thing I might do is just take both of these pills. I'm just going to use my control key, drag them over into my data pane, and now I have something named first and last, and I have new fields for that. I did that before, so I have first name and last name over on the left-hand side. Another cool tip or trick is downloading all shapes from a Tableau public workbook. This can be really handy if you want the shapes of something. There is a Chrome add-in, the link that I provided, and somebody from Tableau actually created this. When you go to the shape extractor, it's going to open up a page for you to add a Google Chrome bookmark. And so you just drag this bookmark up to your bookmarks, and you'll see up here I have one called Extract Custom Shapes. And so now I have that in my workbook, and I can do that. So how does that work? I'm going to come down and I'm going to get this link to this Tableau workbook right here. Just go to a Tableau workbook page, and then I'm going to click on that extract button, and what happens? It downloads all of the images in a zip file from the workbook that I can now have those footprints. And so there I have a zip file for the footprints that I can add to my Tableau repository, and there they all are. Click of a button, really easy. If you want to add an animated GIF to your Tableau workbook, the easiest way to do that is to set up a page It's a little bit of HTML coding, but not very much, as you can see. You just need to host that GIF somewhere. I have it hosted on my dataplusscience.com page. And then that page, in this case, is just a web page, animated for. If I go in here and edit the URL, you'll see that I'm just hosting that page, animated 3 and animated 4. Those are various pages that I have with animation so that you can host any animated GIF in your Tableau workbook, and that'll work on Tableau Public as well. A couple of real quick ones. You want to add quick color. A really easy way to add color, go up here and just click on the category, this little corner icon, just drag it over on top of your chart and you've added color. Another way you can do it is just drag your color pill right down into the pane and you've added color. So you don't have to go find your pill and go over here and search for category, where is it, and you got to find it and put it on color. If you're using whatever you want, you can put subcategory on color, or up here you can put category on color. Real easy drag and drop from your axis. You can also really quickly double click on anything to add a filter. So in this case, I want to add office supplies to my filter and just use office supplies. I can double click on office supplies and now it's a quick filter. I just want to look at envelopes and now it's a quick filter, and I can back them out or drag the pill out. But an easy way to get to your filters, you can even multi-select and double click 2 at a time, and now you have furniture and office supplies. So easy to do that with a control or shift multi-select. And with that, I'm going to stop and pass it over to Lorna.
Great, thanks, Jeff. This time I'm going to go over to how to disconnect the rank lines. So for example, if I highlight this and see appliances, you can see appliances drops out of the top 10 in April 2020. But if I add, by hitting Command or Control, my rank onto my filters, and I click OK, you'll see now if I hit appliances again, it connects that line even though there isn't a point in my data. So how do we stop that from doing this? So what I can do is I can create a calculated field which basically says rank true false. So if the sales rank is less than or equal to 10, then bring me back the sales rank, else null, end. And then I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to replace that sales rank on here. So now you can see that I have my sales rank, but I only have certain amount of my subcategories. So if I click appliances, you'll see now that actually because it's dropped out of the top 10, it then doesn't connect to that line back to my May 2020. False highlighting is something that's been quite apparent in the Tableau community recently, and what that means is when I select something, currently it grays everything out. But what we actually want to do is we want to be able to stop that from happening. I have this field called highlight. If I edit that, it's literally just a word. It can be any word at all. But what I can do is if I go to worksheet actions, I'm going to add in a highlight action. And this time we're going to go from the sheet to the sheet. You can also do this on a dashboard, but I'm going to make sure my selected field is selected as highlight. Give it a sensible name, as always. Click OK, and OK again. And then now when I click on binders, you'll see that actually it doesn't grey out everything. My parameter action isn't currently working on this sheet, but you kind of see what is going on with it. So that's how you stop that false highlighting. A dynamic reference line is pretty cool. So what I can do is I already have my profit and sales parameter set up, but I can change these settings. So if these are based on my profit parameter and my sales parameter. If I go to worksheet actions, we're going to add in a new parameter action. So what I'm going to say is we're going to change the profit value with the profit field from the sum on the select. So this is going to be profit. Click OK. And I'm also going to do the same for sales. So change parameter. This time we're going to do the sales parameter, change the field to sales, and change the name to sales as well. Click OK, and OK again. Now when I click on a mark, it's going to update those parameters. So notice my reference lines changed. Once again, if I click another mark, my reference lines change so that you can use that profit and sales from that specific mark. You can also do the similar sort of thing with dates. So here, if I highlight all of these dates, it's going to take the minimum and the maximum and highlight just those dates. So how does that work? We have two parameters this time. We have a start and an end date. And if I go into my date, let's go to worksheet actions. And here you see we already have my two actions. So if I edit this, all it is we're using the start date parameter like before, but we're just using the date. And this time we're going to say the month, but we're going to use the minimum. And you can probably guess the end one is also then the maximum. So click OK. And then finally, what we have is we have our calculation, which looks at whether the month of order date is greater than or equal to the start date, and whether it's also less than or equal to the end date. You can add this to color, and now when I highlight, it's going to move that selection across. Dynamic dates, just a last little quick one for this section. I only want to show in my parameter this year's and up to and including the current month. So how do I do that? First, we need to isolate those dates. So we need to only bring back up to September 2020. So I'm going to create a calculated field and just call this date reference. And in here, we're going to say the year of today is equal to the year of order date. And the month of today is equal to the month of the order date. And so it is less than or equal to the month of order date. So now I am duplicating a field. So I'm just going to call this date reference A. Now when I bring that into my view and put it onto my rows, you'll see that I have trues. It's because I've got my calculation the wrong way around. I want this to be greater than. Click OK. So you'll see that all of these are now true. So we create one more field, which is date of year. So what we're going to say is if this, which is a true false, then bring me back the order date months. End. Click OK. Now when I bring this into my view, I'm going to hit Option Drag to bring up my date fields, and we're going to have month. Click OK. I'm just going to change this to discrete. So now you can see I'm only bringing back my specific months. In my parameter, I can edit this, and I'm going to change when workbook opens. I'm going to change this to my date year. So now you can see it's got only my date years in there. The final step would be to create the current month. So we just want the date trunk month of today. And I'm going to click OK. This doesn't need to be anywhere in my view, but in my parameter, what I can do is when it says current value, I can change this to say current. Now it's always going to show me the current month in my parameter. So I click OK, and it'll default to September. You can use this in other ways. Jeff, over to you.
Excellent. That's great stuff. I love the setting the parameter to the current date and ranking the fields out. That's really cool. I'm going to do a couple more quick tips here and get to some of the really favorite ones on the daily tips. This one rated really well. People really like this tip, which was how do you move the bottom x-axis to the top? Now you can drag, you can click the axis and drag it up there, and when you do that, it'll swap it, and now your furniture and office supplies are at the bottom and your central are at the top. But that's not what we want. We want both of them at the top. And to do that, we're going to go to our Analysis tab. We're going to go down to Table Layout and go to Advanced. And under the Advanced Table Layout, there is a checkbox that says Show Innermost at the bottom. We're going to uncheck that, just click Apply, and you'll see now that Central, East, South, and West has moved up to the top. So a quick way just to move all of your pills up there up to the top. Another one that's pretty common, this was really popular, as one of the top favorites this year, was how to give yourself some extra space for your label. You want to label the last point, and in here you'll see in my label I just have it checked to just label the most recent point, but there's not enough room for that point to be on the right hand side. I wanted it centered and on the point. So here's what we're going to do, just a quick one that'll be adaptive with our data. We're going to show a forecast. That's going to automatically show a forecast. Notice that it added a bunch of room, so we're going in the right direction. Now we're going to go to our forecast and go to Forecast Options, and under our Forecast Options, we're going to do two things. Number one, we're going to take off our prediction model down here. We don't want that prediction model. And the second thing we're going to do is we're going to say exactly, and we want exactly a certain amount of time. And so in this case, 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months. I can give myself as much room as I need, but I have that time there. And then on my estimate, I'm just going to double click on my color estimate up here. I'm going to double click that for quick color and just change it to white, and now that is gone. So now I have the room, and I can add as much room as I want. I can add 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 months, and it'll adapt with the last point of the data because it'll always add 1 month to the forecast. Okay. Quick measure names and values. I used to do this all the time when I wanted to build out a table. I wanted profit in here, and so I drag measure names up here and then click all, and I'd have all these pills. Well, quick way to get the pills that you want. Drag profit over on top of your ABCs, and now you have your first pill. It added it over here on your text on your marks card. Do the same thing with sales. Now drag sales into that same view right where there's a rectangle, and it'll automatically create your measure names and measure values for you. Measure names ended up on your columns. Measure values is now on your text, and you have the pills that you want without having too many. And if you want to add quantity to that, you can drag quantity, and it'll build it one at a time, as opposed to starting with 27 measures that you don't want in your view. A quick sort of dimensions. You just want to move. East should be on the one side and the west should be on the other side. Well, I'd love to just be able to grab west and drag it over, but it's not dragging. I can't drag it. And if this were rotated in this way, I could take and drag central down. So you could rotate it, and then you could rotate it back, and you have east on the one side and west on the other side. Here's another quick way to do it without rotating your view. You can just duplicate your region. I'm using my control key and just dragging the field next to itself. And now I can drag up here west. I'm going to take west all the way to the left, east all the way to the right. And then I'm just going to get rid of that duplicated pill. An easy way for me to sort those pills without going into a custom sort or without rotating my chart.
Join us after the break for more of our favorite tips.